episode of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is episode number 216, being recorded on Wednesday, May 20th, 2026, on another hot day. This week has been pretty high in the temperature. It's been very sunny out. Actually, we got some pretty gnarly rain last night, or at least for a little while before the sun came back out. And now is the time where we really got to stay focused on our work. It's almost like a test, because it gets so hot and you get tired, you come home from work or from whatever you had to do that day and you're just like, man, I just don't want to do it. And next, you got to go at your own pace. Some days are going to be easier to get the work done than others. Monday was just like, man, I just came home and I was exhausted. I just had to do my pure essentials outside of my artistic essentials. And I'm just like, man, there will be no writing or reading done this evening. I'm like struggling to keep my eyes open. My brain is just fried. I need to just watch some stuff. And then yesterday was totally good, man. We got some fantastic writing done, plenty of reading and watching done. So, you got to go at your own pace. But in this weather, unlike in the winter where people are encouraged to stay inside and encouraged to, bundle up and get warm and have that cozy sort of feeling, here, we want to dress appropriately, make sure that you got enough airflow going throughout your body, making sure that you are staying hydrated. You don't want to fall behind on that. Make sure you're eating enough, having enough energy throughout the day to be able to keep on going without just overexerting and exhausting yourself. And whatever that means to you is up for you to figure out. And if you are in one of these higher temperature climates at the moment, then it's just all about finding what works for you, for getting the job done, for staying hydrated, staying cool and all that. We got the AC running here. We got the fans on. Cold water for the cats. Plenty of food for them to eat. They're still running around like maniacs, though, which is wild. I don't know how they have this kind of energy, but it's very inspirational. And we can learn many things from them just in a state like this. That no matter what, they're still going. They're still going crazy. But anyways, yeah, we're continuing on with my favorite films of the 21st century so far, my 20 favorites. And actually, before we get into that, I probably should have said last time that we are in the middle of Cannes right now. I've been following it too closely, but I have been seeing some murmurs of some new films that have been premiering there, and it seems that, at least from what I've been reading, the general kind of feeling and atmosphere is underwhelming. A lot of acclaimed filmmakers, I think like Hirokazu Kurita has a new film, and Pedro Almodovar has a new film there, and James Gray has a new film. Nicholas Winding Refn premiered his film Out of Competition, I believe it's Out of Competition. Which I didn't even realize is coming out pretty soon at the time of this recording. It's out in July, and I believe Neon's distributing it, which will be very, very much looking forward to that. I haven't watched the trailer that's been released, but I know that's already been shown. But it seems like the general feeling that I've been reading is underwhelming. There's been a lot of I've seen some charts that have been pretty handy that talk about that looks at the films and the overall kind of ratings for them, and another one that doesn't that shouldn't kind of factor into any kind of general expectation for the film. But it is interesting to kind of see where the jury is going for, what they're kind of leaning towards, what they're not. I think Hirokazu Kurita's new film has been one of the lowest ones that has been screened, which is, I'm very curious. I really, really have enjoyed his last two films, Monster and Broker, as well as actually won the Palme d'Or for Shoplifters in 2018, which is also a very good film. But we'll see. It's always fun to see what films are getting some buzz, what will win the Palme d'Or. I don't follow it too closely to have any kind of estimate. In fact, most of the time when I see a film that has won, I go, okay, sure. There's been some good films in the last couple of years. I've talked about the Palme d'Or winners a bunch in the past, gone through them. Last year's It Was Just an Accident by Jafar Panahi was one of my favorites of that year. Really, really well done. Very mature film. Very funny film. And I've gone back and watched a couple of Jafar Panahi's other films, and there's a couple I still need to see. But we'll see. We'll see Well, actually, I'm going to keep that for a bigger conversation in terms of when I am through with my 20 favorites, talking about the year so far in retrospect for films that I have seen. Because I think there has been a general, I don't want to say disappointment, because that would imply that there's any sort of expectations, but there have been some films that I have been curious about that have not quite met, I don't want to say expectations, because you try not to have any expectations, but there are some that you just go, like, that I just thought, man, really, really wanted to like that more. But that will all be talked about in due time after all this, because for the remainder of this, I have 5 films left, and we're going to talk about the next one here. We're in the S's. We're going to talk about Martin Scorsese's 2016 film Silence, which is next up on my favorites of the 21st century. Silence is a difficult film to approach because there's a lot going on here. It's, Scorsese in the 21st century, I think in the latter part has been much more hit than miss for me. I'm trying to think back. I'm going to look here in terms of his 21st century output. I think I've liked most of his work, most of his features. I'm not counting any of the shorts that he did or the commercials or anything like that, or the documentaries. I think the only documentary of his I've seen this century was his Rolling Thunder review, but I know he did Shine a Light, and he did the George Harrison documentary, which I actually did want to see. But in this century, he has done Gangs of New York, which I've said before I'm not really a fan of. It actually might be one of my least favorite Scorsese films. The Aviator, which is one of my favorites from him, actually. I do feel like that is kind of underseen, which is crazy to say for a huge Martin Scorsese film with a big cast like Leonardo DiCaprio and Cate Blanchett, but it's a really great look at Howard Hughes and his eventual sort of mental decline. That's a very well done film. Great cast, too, in that. The Departed, again, not one of my favorites from Scorsese. Shutter Island from 2010, which I do like. Hugo, 2011, which I like. Wolf of Wall Street, 2013, which I like a lot. Then he did Silence. The Irishman, 2019, I think is great. Killers of the Flower Moon, 2023, very good as well. But Silence is the one that, not even just in the 21st century, but in his overall career, and an already impressive career, has come out as one of my top favorites from him. I was talking to some acquaintances recently, we were talking about our top favorite Scorsese films, and I was thinking back to some of my top favorites, of course, Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, but Silence was right there with them. Because this goes into the kind of subset of Scorsese's films about faith. When you're going into The Last Temptation of Christ, which I just watched again recently, and has aged like wine. It's just one of his best films, one of the best films about faith and about the life of Jesus and what that means to be Jesus. And the expectations and just sort of actually a whole other conversation there. But they did Kundun, or I never know how to say that name, Kundun, I've heard it pronounced both ways, 97, about the Dalai Lama, which I actually didn't even see until fairly recently, within the past couple months, and was an exceptional work. I think I had kind of been put off on that because when going through Scorsese's filmography, a film about the Dalai Lama was not one that was quite calling to me. But I was happily, I shouldn't even say surprised, but I was happily taken aback by how much I did enjoy that. But Silence is the one, 2016, that I have. This is based off the book from 1966 by Shizaku Endo, co-written by Scorsese and Jay Cox, who also wrote Gangs of New York and previously wrote The Age of Innocence for Scorsese. Silence is, like I said, it's a tricky film to approach because there's a lot there on the surface, but then there's a lot to dive into. I think there are, especially going off memory on this, because I did not rewatch this. I am going off of the one experience that I had watching it, because I've only seen this film once, and it had such an impact on me, and took me aback that I've thought about this film practically every day. In relation to my own faith. And when it comes to stuff when it comes to topics like faith or politics or anything like that, I really try to avoid that if it's not necessary for the conversation on this show. I don't really gravitate towards sidestepping in a lot of some shows where they almost feel a need to interject some of these topics. But for a case like this, it is, I guess, when I bring up my own faith, it comes into relation of viewing the film and of how I watch the film and the questioning I had and the distressing. I mean, not even exactly distressing entirely, but there are just some sequences in the film that, reflection. Reflection is the word to think of. But we have. Man, I forgot to silence my telephone. There I am acting like a madman, not silencing my phone. I forgot when exactly this takes place. This takes place in the 17th century. We have two Jesuit priests, played by Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver, who are sent to Japan to find what happened to their mentor, played by Liam Neeson Ferreira. He is in the opening scene, and this is at a point in time when Japan was adamantly anti-Christian, when being a Japanese Christian was something to do in secret, because at this point, and I'm not going to pretend like I am some historian or I am going, because I'm not even going to try it. I'm going solely off of the film. But at this point, we have this leader who, I got to get the actor up right here because he is exceptional in the film. Issei Ogata, who is just listed as Old Samurai, but he is the one who sees Christianity as a disease in Japan. And what's interesting about this character is that when you have this person who sees the almost the religious, what's what I'm looking for, the outside religion sort of corrupting Japan. When they see when they talk about in the film, where they talk about not being able to comprehend or not being able to take seriously something that could be outside of your own sort of force, something outside your faith. We don't divulge or take part in anything that is beyond anything in this world. And politically, where Japan was at this time, being more into reason and that idea of belief, and to aggressively push it out, because you have this older samurai who has taken these Japanese Christians and is tortured them, wants them to denounce their faith, and how Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver get caught up into it. And it's a film that it's a little tricky to, I guess, discuss without getting so deep into what individual sequences mean, what a lot of the themes mean, the idea of faith, and where even the title Silence comes from, it's different meanings, including some, like, there's one piece of dialogue that Andrew Garfield has in the middle of the film when he says something along the lines of, am I just praying to silence? Because he starts to, he is pushed to the point of his own faith, where these people who are Japanese Christians being forced to denounce Jesus, to denounce their faith by, stepping on a picture of Jesus or spitting on a cross, and what that means to how far will you go for it? How far will you go for your faith? Because even sometimes when they go through these trials, it doesn't always mean that you are let go, that you are put out there, and sometimes it could be that, okay, you turned your back on your faith and it actually backfired against you. And Andrew Garfield at one point becomes the audience, really, where he's seeing these characters, he's seeing these people who they don't know where to go with their faith. There's actually one of the characters in the film that I really wanted to mention. I think it is Kijiro, played by Yusaku Kubozuka. And he is the one who, I think above all else, even above the Jesuit priest, is having his own sort of trials with his faith. He's constantly, you could see it as him when he's constantly turning his back, when it suits him to say that, okay, well, how strong is his faith really? Is there anything actually there? But the way that he interacts with Andrew Garfield in the film, and how that emulates even Peter in the Bible, you will what is it? You will denounce me 3 times. Sort of like, hey, I'm with you, but then I'm not when it's convenient for me. But then was that the wrong choice? But then I need to look out for myself because the way these Japanese citizens are tortured, it's ruthless. They're drowned. They're burned. They're decapitated. And because this whole area is so, you could say secluded, but it feels so small, where it's sort of like these people are using their faith to try to save their own lives, whatever that may mean. If that means having to denounce it, if that means, going to the ends of it. And the thing is, that is all just one part of the film, because we see Andrew Garfield's character, who has devoted his life to being a Jesuit priest, and what that means for him. Being in this part of the world where they are not interested in Christianity, where they see it as something far more malicious than Rodriguez and I forgot. I don't know. I forgot how to pronounce Adam Driver's character, Garupe, and what that means, and even their own relationship, even how far their own faith kind of tests each other. Andrew Garfield is having his own qualms about where he's going to go with it, and Adam Driver as well has his own stakes at hand in terms of seeing these innocent people tortured for their faith. And it's like I said, that's all one big section of the film. Where the third act gets into, I almost don't even really want to touch, because the third act becomes something entirely different altogether. Because I almost don't even want to talk about it, because it's a film that isn't necessarily about being spoiled, but it's about, I don't just want to go through and just talk about, well, this means this or this means this. And I also don't want to repeat myself, because it is a film that is about endurance as well. And I'm watching this film and I'm sitting there and I'm going, how far are you willing to go for what you believe in? Even if at a certain point it doesn't make sense, because now, or at least it makes sense in the situation, because then there's points where Rodriguez's character, he gets involved with some of these Japanese citizens who get kidnapped, or they get captured, and they're tortured. And does he feel responsibility for what is going on here? Does he feel by devoting himself to Christ that he has now turned his back on others who have also devoted themselves to Christ? Where is that line? And it's also interesting, the idea of something that I didn't really pick up initially, of sort of Andrew Garfield or Rodriguez, as he almost starts to become this, he starts to embody physically the image of Christ at that point, which I don't know in the 17th century if there was that common imagery. I guess I get an idea of it now, but there's at one point at least where Rodriguez kind of sees himself kind of like mirrored with the image of Christ, when Adam Driver and Andrew Garfield, they come to this village, they are looking for Liam Neeson, but they're doing baptisms, they are trying to teach, this small kind of group of Japanese Christians, and telling them, like, no matter what, you have to keep the faith, you have to kind of, it's much easier to kind of say these things, but then when push comes to shove, and it's not only you that's on the line, but people that are following you, people who are looking to you as a Christ-like figure, as someone of the voice of reason, this newfound responsibility, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to how confident you are in what you believe? And the third act, especially when it goes into that, I'd say the final like shot of this film not only encapsulates the whole film, and I think puts the entire film in perspective, but as well as the third act, because there was a very distinct and clear third act about where these characters go to, where their beliefs go to, and how does that mean for them as people, because it is, when you are in a situation like this, when it is not even just life or death, it is beyond that, and it is what you are willing to do with that, what you're willing to do with your own belief. And I'm trying not to repeat myself here, because the thing is with this film is that there is much more going on with that, with the idea of faith being tested to the absolute limit. Excuse me, I had to pause for a second. I was coughing. But like I said before, when Andrew Garfield Rodriguez is being sort of looked at by this Kishijiro character, is Kishijiro any worse than Rodriguez. Rodriguez, who was adamantly confident in his faith, and Kichijiro, who maybe has the faith but isn't as confident in it. But then that gets him ironically further than Rodriguez. What does that mean for that character? What does that mean for his beliefs? Does that make him any less of a believer if it is flimsy, if it is not as rock solid as Rodriguez? And when I say that Rodriguez's faith is rock solid, it comes to a point where there is that doubt. There is that doubt of, am I praying to silence? Has my life been in vain? Have I gotten people hurt for this reason unintentionally? Because people who will hurt others for their confidence in their faith, whether it be deliberately, like say, somebody says something against what you believe in, you can like physically attack them. Or in a case like this, if someone is physically attacked because of what somebody else believes in, where does that put you? Where does that make you as a person, And the film is not here to, much like Faith, there isn't a definite answer. There isn't Rodriguez. There isn't with Rodriguez's character. There isn't a point where he is vindicated or justified by doing or not doing something. Faith is ambiguous, and it does require a leap of faith, and that's what this film is. Because by the end of it, what these characters have gone through and the sacrifices that have been made, whether against their will or not, goes into the idea of what does it mean to have faith? What does it mean to have this idea of something beyond what you can comprehend, And when you look at these characters, when you look at Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver, and their idea of it, in a Western world, not believing is not this aggression towards those who do, and vice versa. Somebody who does believe, there's not this aggression in a wide society of somebody who doesn't. But when you have it goes beyond just like, well, I believe, you don't believe, or vice versa, you believe, I don't believe. It is when these characters see this as something so violent, and they see it as something that needs to be just completely cut off and needs to be when I cut off from society, it goes beyond just a difference of belief or a difference of opinion. It is as if one were to think that, this right or wrong, attacking somebody. Well, taking the whole faith part of it aside, you see somebody in the street, they get attacked. And you could say to yourself, like, okay, well, this is wrong because on the surface level they're being attacked, and I know for a fact that I know that this is wrong, maybe not for a fact. So it's up to me to stop this person from attacking another person. And in the case of ancient Japan, that's how they see Christianity. At this point where they're like, okay, this is not just a point of believing or not believing. This needs to be out of Japanese society, because where Japan was at that period, I'm not going to say like I'm some sort of expert on 17th century Japan. I'm not, but them seeing it as something far more dangerous and far more aggressive, it almost makes them, even when they are, torturing these innocent citizens, it makes them feel justified, and it makes them believe that they are, righteous in what they are doing. That by putting these people away who have this faith, that is going to be a betterment of society as a whole. And that's where it comes into Adam Driver and Andrew Garfield coming in and seeing that completely opposite. And I know I haven't been probably as cohesive or as clear with some of my thoughts on the film in terms of the meanings, the messages. I think if I had watched it again, if I had taken notes, something like that, I think I'd be a bit more comprehensive, at least from where I'm coming from on this. These are just a lot of the ideas that were running through my head when I was watching the film, because when you get to the ending, I think you can look at it as either, what sort of I'm looking for, as sort of an affirmation, or I wouldn't even necessarily a denouncement, but something more, than what these characters are going through. Like I said, I think the final shot in the film kind of sums it all up. And Scorsese is somebody who I've always thought, at least in these films, has had a very mature and very complicated look at his faith and at what that means. Is sort of this leap of faith that you are taking. And the film, I think, can be interpreted many different ways when you get to that third act, which I really don't even want to touch because of the transformation that these characters go through and the revelations that are come across, and sort of, where do you go to after this certain point? What does your life mean after a certain point where you are pushed and pushed into what point? And let's say you're pushed to a certain point and reflecting back on your life, what did it mean? What did it mean for you to have this idea of something that you couldn't prove, that you may have even had doubts on, but it was still there with you, And I'm trying to be kind of intentionally vague with some of that, but I thought it was just so powerful where the film goes to, and I was just sitting there in my living room as the credits were rolling, really thinking about, my own faith and really where I would be in this situation. And it's a question that I can't answer. But it's a film it's the only film I've seen of this type to really kind of make me think about it. Not as in a doubt of my own, my own beliefs or whatever. That's beside the point. But of just being in this situation and certain steps that you would take that may or may not have been the right choice. It's very hard to talk about. And in this film, and I'm not going to, on a more kind of surface level sort of analysis. I mean, the cinematography in the film is incredible. I don't know who the DP was on this, but there are plenty of great. It's a very gray looking film, plenty of great shots. There's some great sequences in the fog. When they get to Japan, it's very dreary. But then there have these really wonderful sequences in the middle of the day, set against these scenes of violence, and the violence as well is very well done. It's very gruesome. It's very not gruesome. That's the word I'm looking for. It is very harrowing without being gruesome. I flip my words there, because you'll just have these long sequences of these characters being tortured, but not in a way where it's ogling at them. It's like a character characters who are bound and are drowned, and the idea of it more horrific than anything we actually see, or characters who are crucified and are just slowly being drowned. And it's like that kind of ties into sort of the different beliefs that these characters have, and sort of what is right and what is wrong where you are. What do you follow, what do you believe, and how do you value another person, and what they're willing to live or die for. Of Scorsese's films, I think this is one that I just don't know if I can properly put it into words. Entirely, all of the ideas that I'm kind of gaining from this. I'm sort of scatterbrained in my thoughts here, and if it didn't come out as coherent as I'm trying to make it, then I do apologize. But I think this film is the strongest film about faith, and it's about, like I said, all these ideas before, where you're willing to go with it, and what it means to a person to have that. And I'm going to stop myself right there. I know if I keep talking, I'm going to start going in circles again and make a fool of myself. But that's going to be it for this episode, guys. I was trying to find a way to talk about this film properly, and I think that without any sort of notes or guidance in front of me, it's kind of it's a little tricky. But it's a film that, even if you are not religious, if you don't have any kind of belief or anything like that, I think you can still get the ideas of these characters in here, of what it means to them, of something as simple as just, is stepping on a religious image, and what that means to them, more so whether or not if you even believe or not. I think it's just an incredibly powerful film, and unquestionably my favorite of Scorsese's 21st century work, but just of his work as a whole, is one that I've just found myself just thinking about constantly. And I do think that this has not got the attention maybe some of his other 21st century work has, but it's a brilliant film, and just a highlight in an already impressive filmography. But that'll do it for this episode, guys. I do appreciate it. Probably 2 more episodes of this, and then we'll get back to just the general kind of discussion on films, on literature, art, life. But that'll be it for this one. I appreciate you guys listening, and until next time.